Gen Z, Gen Z, what is up? Gen Z, what is up, man? My name is Sadiq Spears, and this is not a podcast. It is a show where we bring the most pertinent topics pertaining to Gen Z, whether that's within politics, business, or media. The idea is to be perceptive to what? Build perspective. Okay, listen, we got a slew of topics to get to today. Okay, we're ramping up attacks on Venezuela. We're actually going to war. The Supreme Court might fail us again when it comes to the decision on the Voting Rights Act. We're going to talk about it. What else? The AWS servers went down this week, so a bunch of businesses had to either go down or they had to figure it out or have some backup services, but most of them did not. So Zoom and multiple other businesses went down. We're going to talk about that. And then quick updates on the government shutdown. The government shutdown is still happening. 42 million Americans might go without food because SNAP benefits will not be going out in November. So it's definitely something to be looking at, and we're going to be talking about it. But listen, we are hosted on the Perspective Media Network. You can follow us down in the description below. The links, to the YouTube, to the TikTok, to the Instagram. This is where we're able to get out a lot of our ideas. And, it's just Gen Z media made by us for us. Okay. So listen, last week I missed. I know. Terrible. I had a 13-week streak. And it got cooked, but it's okay because this week we have a special treat for y'all. We have an urban planner coming, and we're gonna be doing a little quick interview at the end of this episode. So make sure y'all stay tuned because it's going to definitely be interesting. My friend, but also an urban planner that's from Flatbush, and is very entangled into the local politics in Brooklyn. So we're definitely going to be talking about the upcoming election and everything that's coming. Everything that's coming, but that's soon. Don't jump too ahead. Don't jump ahead. So listen. Venezuela. I've been wanting to talk about Venezuela for the last couple of weeks. I've been seeing in headlines that we have moved up military personnel to the Caribbean. That was about like 4 weeks ago. So we moved up a couple of boats, basically signaling that we might get into some military action. Come about 3 weeks ago, we took our first strike on a couple of boats within the Caribbean. The reasoning for this is that Trump gave two reasons. One is that we're attacking drug cartels that's operating with the Caribbean, but also within Venezuela. Venezuela denounces this. In addition to that, they're also saying that Venezuela has dumped political prisoners or prisoners in general into the states. That has not been substantiated by evidence yet. So I'm just going off the drug cartels. That's the reason. That's the reasoning behind these attacks. Now, second week passes. Another attack happens on a couple of other boats. Come to find out, it wasn't just Venezuelans that was hit, but it's also Trinidadians. So now you have a lot of Trinidadians, but also Trinidad that's ramping up and trying to come to terms whether or not this is war crimes or if this is sanctioned. Granted, a lot of UN leaders have said that this might come with some war crimes because he's not declaring war, but he's just taking a couple of attacks in the Caribbean. Now, I think it was last week, our head for the U.S. military for Latin America stepped down. I don't know why, and it's not been rumored why, but he stepped down 2 years in advance of when he was supposed to complete that position. So a big reasoning or some ideas that's coming about this is that he and maybe Pete Hegseth, who is the Secretary of the Department of War, is not really seeing eye to eye on how to handle Latin America at the moment. Pete Hegseth, who's in line with the Trump administration, has been pretty adamant on being war ready. They changed the Department of Defense to the Department of War, and now it's being taken out on Venezuela. So, I'm going to put my thinking cap on. Why are we going to attack Venezuela, right? We do know that Venezuela and some Latin American countries has oil, Trinidad has oil as well, which is why a lot of Trinidadians might be scared that it's not just going to be Venezuela, but it might be some other countries like Trinidad. But Venezuela has oil. And I've been looking and researching a lot into this because Venezuela's government said the only reason that the U.S. is in Venezuela is because of their oil. Now, looking at the oil landscape and looking at energy landscape, I know that during Biden's term, a huge problem was that Americans did not like their gas prices shooting through the roof. So Biden made it adamant and made it a point that Ukraine does not attack Russia's energy fields. Why? Because if they attack Russia's energy fields and Russia's oil supply goes down, it makes it much more expensive for the world's oil because Russia's a huge exporter of oil. I think about 10% of crude oil comes out of Russia for global production, which is a lot. That is a lot. Don't let me lose you. Don't let me lose you. So that was a big point in Biden's term, was to make sure that they do not hit any energy fields, because if that does happen and those oil prices rise up, then Americans are going to be pissed. Now, I don't know if you've been seeing, but in the last couple of weeks, in the last couple of months, Ukraine has attacked energy fields in Russia, and they've been targeting it. And with the latest missiles and stuff like that they've been talking about, those are their targets, is those energy fields. Now, if that still is a problem, that energy prices may rise if they attack Russia, then Trump needs to have somewhat of something in his back pocket. Now, there's been most amount of applications, I'm pretty sure, in years that's been granted to oil drillers in the States as well, not just in the States land, but also on native land and in Alaska. So the idea is that Americans are going to start drilling a lot more this year and into the next couple of years. So we have those reserves in case that those Russia prices inflate. But let's say if those reserves go out, or that only lasts us for the next couple of years and we still have to wait on production, maybe having a country that is going to give us some cheap oil, or we're going to give us some cheap oil, having that in our back pocket isn't the worst thing, think as like a world leader. So I don't know. I'm not alleging that that's the reason as to why the U.S. is in Venezuela, but I would definitely say that could be an alarming point as to why we might be there. And, knowing U.S.'s history, I mean, Guatemala, Chile, Egypt, China, India, rumored to be Ghana. But these are all reported places that the CIA has been and has committed maybe some coups in some of those countries, Democratic Republic of Congo, right? This is declassified information stuff, right? So, we know that the U.S. history and CIA's history has been a part of many coups in different nations. And with President Maduro, who is going up against Trump now, who's saying, I don't want regime change, I don't want war, why is Trump continuously attacking him if he's willing to work with Trump to rid out the cartels? I ask these questions to myself. So I'm not alleging nothing. I'm just saying that typically the reason why we intervene a lot is because those countries may have resources that we want. And in this situation right now, Venezuela has a huge resource that we may want. And in 30 years, when it might get declassified, that the CIA is in there. Oh, my fault to say that as well. Trump has confirmed that the CIA has been in cahoots or has done action in Venezuela already. This was reported a week ago. So we're going to war with Venezuela. We don't know the reason why, but a big reason that could be coming, and also what Venezuela has said, is that it's because of oil. Now, in other news, I hope y'all doing good out there. Let me slow it down. Hope y'all doing good out there. How's y'all weeks, man? How was y'all week? My week has been pretty good. October's ended. My birthday was 4 days ago. So, had a great celebration. I read for a while, so that was good. It helped me calm myself down. But my mind low-key has just been on business. It has just been on business, and getting these clips out. Also, I just hired an editor, so a lot of clips are coming out. Hopefully, they're not too incendiary because I'm not handling them. But hopefully, y'all are seeing some cool stuff come out on your timelines and whatsoever. And how y'all weeks, put it in the comments, of course. So, second topic, the Supreme Court might fail us again, and this one might be the nail in the coffin. So, fast back, or was it? Rewind, whatever. 1965 Voting Rights Act comes out, it gets passed. In Louisiana 2 years ago, there was 1 out of 6 districts that was black, right? If you know about how they draw up maps, it's about counties and it's about how voters typically align, right? So when we talk about what a black district might look like, it just means that if there's a bunch of counties that are black, then they're probably going to lean in as a black voter, and we just align people within those bounds, right? So a Supreme Court case is going up into Louisiana, and they're deliberating on it as we speak, regarding the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and specifically Section 2. And Section 2 currently allows courts and states to require race-conscious districting when minority voters are systematically outvoted, and entitles vote dilution. Right? So the Section 2 is basically, in the Voting Rights Act, is to protect minority voters so they don't get dispersed out into different maps and they don't have any representation when it comes to voting. Okay. So 2 years ago, it was 1 out of the 6 districts that were black in Louisiana. Louisiana is 1/3 black, 33%. 1 divided by 6 is 0.17 or 17%. Okay. So that means if you multiply 1 times 2 to make 2 out of 6 districts, that would match the population size of black people in Louisiana. Why? Because 1/3 of Louisiana is black, and 2 divided by 6 is 33%. So if you were to match the districts to the population, it would be 2 out of the 6 districts should be black in Louisiana, and that's what they were arguing 2 years ago. It was granted that they could make another black district to make it 2 out of 6 about it like a year ago. It was granted that, but it was going to get appealed into the Supreme Court, and that's where we're at today. Now, obviously I just gave y'all the reasoning as to why it would make sense for a second district to be black in Louisiana, because it just matches the population. Now, that's not the only reason that should be for making a district. It should not just be because these are black people that you can make that district. There's a bunch of other classifications as to why you should be drawing these maps around it, not just race. But to make sure that they do not, to have representation within, voters or your House of Representatives, you got to make sure that these minorities are being represented. And that's what they ruled on a couple of years ago. Now, you have a lot of voters, white conservative voters, that are challenging this at the moment in the Supreme Court. They're basically saying this was done completely off of race, and race should not be a factor when we're determining this. Okay. Now, you may ask, that doesn't sound too bad. I mean, like, if they're moving maps together to fit just race, then that doesn't really make sense, right? But, I mean, voters want to have some type of representation in Congress, right? Like, if I have a representative that does not represent me or my county or a string of counties around me, like my color or whatever, that might be a problem. I might find little solace in the system that's supposed to protect me, right? If my representative in Congress looks completely different than me, how do I know that they're going to fight for me? How do I know that they're going to fight for the policy that I actually care about, right? So that's a big reason as to why people would say that. Now, backing up a little bit, yes, if you were to look at the Louisiana map, it looks like you have the districts, I'm going to put it up, but you have the districts going down in the middle. And that connects from Shreveport down to, I believe, Baton Rouge, and then it goes down into New Orleans, around that area. It is connecting down the parish river cities plus urban cities, which typically black people operate anyway around and in. So connecting those counties doesn't seem too far-fetched because that's where a lot of those people are represented. And knowing that Louisiana is 1/3 black, it would make sense as to why you're matching the 2 out of 6 districts. People are fighting it in Supreme Court right now, basically saying that race should not be a factor when you're deeming this. And it's the same kind of argument that people had in DEI. Race should not be a factor. Now, this be my biggest problem with America and conservatives. It's just the complete neglect of race in 2025, 2024, 2023. And basically saying, why are we focusing on race? What's the point? I'm not racist. I don't care about that. And I want to just remind America. I do want to remind America that the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. 35 plus 25 equals 60. 60 years. So that was done in a 60-year span. The first slaves that was brought to America was done in 1500s, 1550, around then. 1550 up until 1930s of Jim Crow's law, it's like 400 years. 400 years is about 7 to 8 lifetimes. So what you're basically saying, or what conservatives are basically saying, is that in one lifetime, 60 years, racism is supposed to be completely eradicated from not only systems, but also people, bias, in one lifetime. But those 7 and 8 lifetimes is definitely not an effect on the American system. That those 7 and 8 lifetimes are definitely not in the psyche of Americans. That's what people are trying to make us assume or make us believe. I can't believe that. That's not. Wells Fargo had discrimination cases happening out 2 years ago. Those discrimination laws and cases and stuff that people have been fighting has been happening since 1930. Since 1930s. Those discrimination cases. And Wells Fargo had it again within the last 5 years. So no, you cannot tell me that 8 lifetimes of racism, 8 lifetimes of racism and institutional racism, systematic racism is rid away since 1965 in one lifetime. That's just dumb. Doesn't even make sense. That doesn't even make sense. And that's my biggest problem, is that why, when it comes to now evaluating race, when it comes to even the playing fields, this is when we want to say that race is not a factor. I have no problem with America saying, hey, I want to get past this. I agree. I want to get past this as well. I think America should right its wrongs. It's that simple. I think America should right its wrongs. And I do have a take on that, but I'm going to save it for the TikTok. So go to TikTok, my TikTok, Sadiq.ranks, if you want to see that tape. Because actually, I hit it right now. Okay? It's my idea. Same thing during COVID, right? And this applies to infrastructure, but this also applies to America's righting its wrongs in general. Why didn't America, during COVID, when we were taking out and printing a bunch of money while the whole world was in disarray, why didn't we just bet on ourselves at that moment? Why didn't we invest into infrastructure, $200 billion here to infrastructure? I'll further it. We should also look at the same way that we could throw some money to infrastructure to build some bullet trains, to build better systems. We should also be investing into our own people like that. You want productivity. You want productivity from minorities. You want productivity from most people. So why not invest into those people? $200 billion here to infrastructure, $250 billion to infrastructure, $150 billion to Black Americans, $200 billion to Indigenous Americans. That's not hard to do. What is $1 trillion to $36 trillion of debt? Now listen. Although I'm a business guy. But I thought it's good business practice to rid your debts before you go in to make a huge purchase. Most of the time. I'm thinking that's good business practice. And that's what America can do. But it chooses on every single opportunity not to do so. So we could right our wrongs. And when it comes to race, it's okay to call it out. I don't want race to be a thing in 30 years either. But just right the wrongs real quick, knock out the money, say you paid it, and at that point, you can wash your hands and say, all right, now race is completely eradicated. We do not have to go forward with this. But because it's not, because there's systematic effects that comes down, Black unemployment rate just rose to 7%. While all other, except for Hispanics, remain similar to what it was in the last 5 years. But Black unemployment rate skyrocketed to 7%. I think white unemployment rate is 3.7. Don't let me lose you. That's crazy. Those are systematic effects. And I feel like people forget how short of time 40 years could be, 60 years could be, 100 years could be. Short time spans right there. You think everything is written? You think systematic bias within people is written within 100 years? It's just pendulum swings. Okay. So yeah, I definitely think that race should be evaluated, especially when it comes to the voting, is because you want representation. If not, nobody's going to believe in the system. If not even my representation in the House of House of Representatives, If I don't have representation there, man, why would I ever care to vote anywhere else? And that's what they're looking to attack right now with Section 2. If they rule in favor of ridding out Section 2 or not having to evaluate it, then minority representation in voting completely goes eradicated. They don't have to anymore. That was in that was a law. So yeah, definitely something to pay attention to. Something that I'm looking at because damn man, like DEI already got eradicated, and you see how the black unemployment rate is rising. You see how federal jobs are decreasing. You see how they're doing a bunch of layoffs and stuff like that. But who is going to be the trickle down effect? What communities? Minority communities. And that's why you see black unemployment rates skyrocketing. That's scary. Perfect segue. Quick updates on the government shutdown. I don't even know. I was going to say the 17th day last week, but let me see the exact date. Because this is nuts. So ongoing right now. 24. We're on our 24th day of the shutdown. 24th day of the shutdown. This is the first day, I believe, that federal workers did not get paid. They didn't get their first paycheck in full. I think the military is being covered by a random donor. But every other federal worker is cooked right now. And they're pleading not only to Congress, but they're pleading to the American people, administration in general, everybody, for them to be able to get some type of pay, especially because they do a duty to our country. And our representatives in Congress can't get it resolved. It's all over a couple of stipulations in the big, beautiful bill on whether or not millions of Americans can be insured or not and get tax credits to make sure that their premiums don't skyrocket. That's what's being held up. That's why it's being held up. It's crazy. And again, American workers, Americans are the ones affected the most. Of course, those politicians are paid. Of course, those politicians are happy. It does not matter because even if they're infighting for the next 2 years, they're still going to get paid. That's the problem with our system too. I was watching a video from Dan Harmony, but just talking about how between elites and regular people, even when shit is going bad, elites always still gets paid. They always still get paid, whether it goes up or down. And Americans are there left to fight for the crumbs. There to fight for the crumbs, man. Okay. Yeah, so the government shut down. Federal judge has blocked Trump's ability and threats to lay off thousands of workers. So we'll see if that gets permitted soon. But a big threat that was happening from the administration is basically saying that if the Democrats were to continue to hold up the shutdown, which is what I was saying before about the millions of Americans going uninsured, to holding that up. If they were to continue to hold that up, Trump was basically threatening, saying we're going to put mass layoffs on all those many of those federal workers that are already furloughed off. Furloughed meaning that they're not getting paid, but they're going to work, and hopefully when they come back, they get paid. He's basically saying that we would fire y'all, but we got stopped by this federal judge. Continuous hardball by our administration. Continuous bully ball by our administration happens time and time again. And it just keeps being shown, man. It keeps being shown. Venezuela, Supreme Court, like media. I was also seeing in the news, it's not a topic, but something I did want to talk about. I was seeing in the news that there's a bunch of publications, I think like CBS and a couple of others, that has pulled out of White House reporting because there was a huge stipulation package that was sent to a bunch of them. It was basically saying that we want you to sign on, the political commentators. Excuse me. They wanted you to sign on to say that I don't know if it's agree, but understand the stipulations and terms that the White House has set now in regards to media. Now, a bunch of them said that they would have to be held liable for a lot of the stuff that they would say, which is why a lot of the networks are actually pulling out. Very interesting to look at, but I mean, we already knew about this. I mean, he already took out millions from YouTube, millions from CBS, millions from NBC, I believe, allegedly for the NBC, but millions across multiple publications. he's taking millions out of by suing them. I wonder how much power he could wield when it comes to the White House and government contracts. I don't even know that side. So something interesting. And touching a little bit more on the government shutdown stuff. I mean, 42 million Americans rely on SNAP. I grew up raised off of SNAP, probably like from 7th grade up, off of SNAP. EBT, SNAP, if you don't know what SNAP is, sorry, my fault. SNAP is benefits, food stamps, and it basically grants a lot of families, maybe even just mothers and child. I think it's WIC is protected, but it grants millions of Americans food, cold food, not hot food. You can't go to Burger King with it. You can't go get, you might be able to get a milkshake from Stewart's or something like that, but you can't get a lot of stuff. I mean, you can't get hot food, but you can get cold food from it, groceries. That's what a lot of millions of Americans use to eat. And that's getting eradicated in November if they do not resolve the shutdown. So there's people's lives attached to this. There's food that's attached to this. And people's livelihoods as well. People not getting paid. And our politicians, although they act as if they have such a strong emphasis to keep going and to I guess resolve the shutdown, it's obviously not getting done. And I don't know how the standstill is going to resolve. Who's going to hold out? I said this 2 weeks ago, but our government is hell bent on being a hard ass. It's a forever game of chicken. You will forever lose. You will forever lose with a crash out. Don't let that go. Let me say it one more time. You will forever lose with a crash out. And that's who we have in our governments. That's who we have running our government as right now. We have crash outs. That's cool with letting it burn to the ground to win, which is very scary. You know, I even think about like the stuff that's happening in Chicago, the ICE protests, that type of stuff. Like if our administration keeps meeting conflict with conflict instead of resolution, who's going to be the deciding factor in this? Especially the people keeps continuously getting angry. You know, the government is supposed to be the pacifier, but it's the opposite. Okay. Last topic before we get into our interview. 1 second. Okay. Last topic before we get into our interview is the AWS servers going down. Now, I don't really care about this because why? This is the same thing that happened with CrowdStrike last summer as in summer of 2024, and a bunch of other companies and servers went down as well. And this is just another example of alarming consolidation of power. AWS having a significant market share of cloud computing. I think it's about like 30%, meaning that 30% of those companies rely on Amazon to run. They run their servers, they run the cloud computing, and that's what they do. So when Amazon goes down, a lot of those companies go down. Why? Because they didn't have backup servers on other companies. They just dealt with Amazon. So that's the problem when it comes to consolidation of power. You want to be able to break this up into multiple different companies, because if not, then we have so much reliance on one company, or so much reliance on one company. You know, it also gives me a little bit of like more fear when it comes to other maybe data aggregators, not just cloud computers, but like data aggregators like Oracle, right? Like Oracle deals with so much of data and databasing for many, many, many companies. Not just companies, but hospitals, government agencies. They deal with that. So what would happen if, let's say, Oracle got hacked? Or Oracle got hacked or leaked databases or something like that. All those T-Mobile leaks that we've been seeing for the last couple of years, in which causes your phone to get all these random texts from EasyPass. I know if you feel me, you feel me. But those type of hacks could definitely happen to Oracle. Those type of codes in the those type of bugs in the DNS code that happen to Amazon could happen to Oracle, could happen to CrowdStrike, could happen to the other companies that hold so much power when it comes to cloud computing or energy, or databasing or data aggregators in the tech space. They hold a lot of power. And if you didn't know about that CrowdStrike outage, or if you forgot about it from last year, that wasn't just random Zoom companies and other companies that you might work for. That was like airlines, hospitals, financial services, retail. That's when it gets scary. That's when it gets very scary. I remember that people talk about the airlines and stuff like that going down last year. That is nuts. And it just continuously alarms people that worry about power consolidation. Because you think about it, we're all on energy grids. What happens if a cybersecurity attack happens on New York's energy grid? I feel like as we're getting more into a technological state, this is going to be more and more prevalent. And finding out ways to be safe about it. I don't even think there's like a safe way to if I'm being honest, this is my personal opinion, is a safe way to hoard your data. Like, if they want it, they got it. I don't know. I saw Palantir stock price for the last couple of years. Those are government contracts, So if they want it, they got it. I don't know how to protect it. I even think about like people talking about ChatGPT and how much ChatGPT information they have on you, and I'm like, man, there's companies out there. I literally pitch stocks like this. Like, there's companies out there that completely scrapes the internet of your information, scrapes everything that they can find, not just the internet, but like anything that they can find, and makes a profile of you and sells it to companies so they're able to market to you. I think, I'm gonna find these company names because I was looking up and researching them like last year. But I'm gonna find them and I'm put them in the description so you can see what I'm talking about. But they're like marketing companies. Like, this is like normal, very normal, that do this, create these profiles, scrape the internet and everything to create a profile for you so they could have people to come to them and say, hey, I need to market to these people. And they're like, all right, well, I already got the profile. Hit these people. I want to hit Gen Z Black Americans. I want to hit baby boomers, hit Hispanic baby boomers. And they got that profile with your name right there, easy like that. So this AWS service, it's not really something that I'm extremely worried about. It feels like corporate business should be a lot more worried about that, especially their data getting leaked. But this is above a lot of people's pay grade. And at this point, this is not something that everyday Americans can really fix. This is something that corporate businesses or government regulation has to fix. And obviously, we see where corporations and our government, what direction they're heading in. Okay. I think it is time. We're going to switch over to the interview format. Is there anything else or updates I got to tell y'all before that happens? Nah. I think that's good, man. Make sure y'all follow Perspective, man. We're going to get right into it. Hold on. Perspective. I done told you we have a special guest and a special treat. And today, we're joined by my good friend, Jerrell Gray, the urban planner from Flatbush, New York. Man, go ahead and say what's up.
Yes, sir. Yo, what's up, yo?
Yes, sir. And listen, I got a good bio to read from my good friend. Give me a second. We're right here with it. Jerrell Gray is an urban planner and community organizer from Flatbush, Brooklyn, the son of Grenadian and Guyanese immigrants. Jerrell is currently the Assistant Director of Health Policy and Government Affairs at Public Health Solutions, the city's largest public health nonprofit. Outside of work, he dabbles in Prospect Lefferts Gardens Neighborhood Association and Strategy for Black Lives. He's well decorated, accomplished man. And, I'm glad that he's over here joining us.
Appreciate that, bro.
Yes, here at the Perspective Media Network. Listen, we have an upcoming election, so he dabbles in NYC politics, but also talks about urban planning. So we have a lot to talk about. Mm-hmm. First off, how you feel about Zeron? Actually, no, let me introduce yourself, and you can speak a little bit to the network.
Yeah, appreciate you, man. I'm very excited to be the first interview on my brother's podcast.
Yes,
I've
sir.
been seeing the work. It's not a podcast.
It's not a podcast, man.
For facts, we're going to be yapping on this. But no, happy to be here, share some knowledge. I've got into urban planning, been into local politics, local organizations. So have a wealth of knowledge that I can share with y'all, especially from a Gen Z perspective. I know still got the baby face, no beard. He got more facial hair than me. and I'm not gonna tell my age, but I'm a little bit older than him. But happy to be here, ready to cook up. Some topics we got for y'all. So
of course. So I'm not gonna ask you this the wrong question yet, but with the upcoming local election, what's a characteristic or a list of characteristics regarding leadership that you kind of look for in a candidate?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the biggest thing and the first thing when I'm thinking about a candidate and evaluating a candidate is seeing if they're in touch with reality. And what do I mean by that? So if I'm speaking to a candidate and I tell them that, my biggest issues is my ability to pay rent or to buy food, buy groceries. And they look at me and say, okay, Jerrell, appreciate you for sharing. I'm going to hire 5,000 police officers. It's clear that person is out of touch with my reality, and he's out of touch with the millions of other New Yorkers who are telling people the same thing, right? It's hard to pay for rent, it's expensive, and it's hard to pay for groceries.
Affordability.
So it's just a level of discernment that I would want to see from that candidate, to be able to listen to my problems, assess them, and actually put together solutions that addresses what I'm doing. And second, I think a big thing is courage, right? Being a candidate in itself is a courageous act. Subjecting yourself to a lot of scrutiny for people to come at your history, look at your resume, your family, look through your pictures, looking for anything, right? So I think it's a courageous act, even being a candidate. And then I think it takes even more courage to go against special interests, people who have a lot of money, who may be lobbying and spending millions
Super
against
PACs.
your campaign. Exactly. And it's also courageous to go against the status quo, right? To go against people who are telling you that, this is how things have been done, and we're going to continue to do this. And it's courageous to be like, no, let's try something different, right? Innovation is being courageous. So I think, those are probably like the top two things that I really care about when it comes to, looking at a candidate.
Yeah, definitely. I guess like even talking about like that affordability aspect, you're from Flatbush, Brooklyn. So it's definitely like, I guess talking about housing and just health is definitely prominent within those areas, because I mean I know a lot of Black people are struggling at the moment with the rising unemployment and especially like gentrification. So I guess talk a little bit to what an urban planner is.
So urban planning is a field where you're given a plethora of skills to be able to study cities, analyze trends, past, present, and forward looking of cities, neighborhoods, and come with solutions to be able to solve people's problems from neighborhood to neighborhood to city. Right. So I think, you get there's people who focus on transportation, MTA down to the bus stops where trees are in your neighborhood, bike lanes. There's urban planners that focus on housing, urban planners. And then for me personally, I've always been interested in being like an interdisciplinary, like jack of all trades.
So then how'd you end up, I guess, in health?
Great question. So I'm in public health. And more or less, the reason why I got into urban planning was to be able to, one, understand what was happening in my neighborhood, but also acquire that language so I could be able to, communicate it back to people like me who might be experiencing the same things. And with that, the goal was always to get resources into people who need them the most. And public health and urban planning are overlapping disciplines, right? If your neighborhood doesn't have a lot of trees, or you live near a highway, right, you might be more susceptible to asthma and other respiratory issues. If you live in a food desert and don't have access to healthy, fresh food, right, you're more likely going to be susceptible to hypertension, diabetes, right, heart disease. And if you don't have stable housing, it's more likely than not you're not taking care of your health, right? So it's been a seamless transition working in public health, and the goal's always been to get these neighborhoods and the most vulnerable people resources, and that's what I've been doing.
I think urban planning is so cool because like even like I guess the intersection within public health, because when you talk about kind of like the diet stuff, like my friend's a dietitian, and we lived in Lower East Side for NYU, but I lived in a food desert for years, and just not even experiencing never experiencing that before, and then moving there and then going to Brooklyn a little bit where there's a bunch of food deserts and just not affordable grocery stores like Key Food or like Lincoln Market or Union Market, that a bunch of grocery stores are coming in. That's why I kind of like Zoran's free grocery store, not free grocery stores, but like reduced grocery stores, because it's just like, bro, a lot of these grocery stores are putting a $3, $2 premiums on top of something. When if you go to Trader Joe's down in downtown Brooklyn, eggs might be $3, $4. At one of those markets, it's gonna be 7, 8, 9. You know?
So yeah, it's even crazy that we have like this, you know, I don't think Poughkeepsie's upstate, but this upstate, downstate dynamic, right? So
Shout
I
out
did
845.
yeah, so I went to school in Western New York. I want to get my geography right. I went to school in Rochester, and you know the big thing up there was Wegmans. And like you said, right, growing up in Brooklyn, my mom compared, you know, the prices amongst the local supermarkets, right? So if Key Food had a higher price than Associated, we were going to Associated. And if Associated had a higher price than Ideal, we were going to Ideal or C-Town, right? But once I got older and started shopping in Trader Joe's and started shopping in Wegmans, I started to notice that, I thought these bigger, you know, more higher quality brands would be more expensive, and they were actually a lot cheaper than the local supermarkets, which is crazy. So, no. Yeah, but there's definitely a ton of overlaps.
Yeah. And I guess like harping a little bit on Brooklyn and Flatbush, I know you do a couple of community things there. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I got my start in organizing in 2020 with a group called Strategy for Black Lives, right? I played football and just was like focused on school. But after the murder of George Floyd, some of my friends came together and they started an organization in May 2020. And, you know, I joined, learned how to community organize, and we did a lot of great stuff for 5 years, right? We started off protesting in the streets and telling people to fill out their census.
Okay.
But,
groundwork.
you know, and then it elevated to being like a real community organization, right? We help people apply for their community board. We held virtual forums during the Zoom era for all of like the citywide races, mayor, comptroller, Manhattan DA. We did that with a bunch of other organizations. One of the programs that I led was a Black Fatherhood Circle. We brought 75 Black fathers from the New York City region, New York, New Jersey region, brought in a therapist, had discussion, breakfast. And then we also threw an annual Juneteenth celebration that within the last year, you know, had over 1,000 people.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So
sounds like Prospect.
Yeah, so with that, it was up in Harlem, but no, so that's really how I got my start, and now you know, stay involved in my fraternity, working with our mentorship program, Brooklyn high school students. Recently got involved with my neighborhood association. We did a local film screening where we showed 3 films from New York-based directors and had them do a Q&A after we showed their film in a black-owned business too, right? So, you know, I always wanted to, once I got back from Rochester a couple years ago, my goal was to organize where my feet was at and organize in my hood. So,
and that's good that you're saying that, because I wanted to highlight that, because a lot of people ask, especially younger people, and even like people that move into Brooklyn or move into New York, some people would call them transplants, like ask how would they get, you know, organized, or how would they get involved into their communities and stuff like that. But sometimes it's as simple as, you know, a Google search, you know, or like, or what's some other strategies that you think?
No, literally, it's just, you know, look for like, first off, find your interest, find your niche, right? And like you don't have to do everything, right? There's a whole bunch of organizations that do food distributions, especially what's going on with the federal government now. I think that's going to be very important. So people,
you talking about the shutdown?
Yeah, the shutdown with SNAP. I think a lot of people are going to be going hungry. A lot of people,
42 million of Americans rely on SNAP and EBT.
Exactly. So you know, get involved with the local food pantry. A lot of, you know, neighborhoods have like community gardens that you could go and volunteer with. There's organizations that's doing donation drives, right? Like there's a plethora of things. All you have to do is like search up a neighborhood and then search up volunteering. And I'm sure there's going to be a list of organizations that are doing great work, but even down to a more local level, speak to your neighbors, right? Somebody's bound to put you on, right? You know, say good morning, right? And it's so funny, it's coming from a Caribbean household, right? Like it was hard for me to walk past some of my elders in the neighborhood and be like, not saying good morning. So every now and again, I'm coming from the gym, I hit somebody, hey, good morning, and they'd be like, oh, good morning. Like they wouldn't expect it.
I was literally walking on Snyder. And it was
Snyder, what you know about that? I'm going on about no Flatbush.
It was a Sunday morning. I'm like, bro, I don't know. It was a Sunday morning, so everybody's outside. It's like elderly people, you know, they're you know, probably sweeping the street, literally. And I was like, you know, let me see some good mornings. And I just haven't. It felt like I haven't said good morning in so long, but it just felt appreciated, like especially the two other people that I said it to, you know, like faces light up and stuff like that, and that's how you build a lot more community, even when you feel like sometimes it's lost, especially because, you know, they waiting on it.
Yeah, for a fact. Don't be scary, you know.
Okay, along those lines, I guess, what does a united Flatbush Brooklyn look like to you, and what's some structural changes that you could see?
So crazy how you asked about structural changes. So I'm just gonna jump out the gun and say that I think New York City needs a black agenda, right? Not yet working class. I didn't say working class. I didn't say BIPOC. I said a black agenda.
Talk about it.
And the reason why I'm saying that is because between 2010 and 2020, New York City lost 84,000 black residents.
But wait, say it again.
Between 2010 and 2020, New York City lost 84,000 black residents.
Damn.
69,000 of those residents came from Brooklyn.
Damn.
And 20,000 of the residents came from my neighborhood of Flatbush.
Bro, no way.
Exactly. And now if you take a peek to the prior decade, right? 2000 to 2010, you know, urban planner, I got to have the numbers. During that decade, New York City lost a little bit over 100,000 black residents.
That sounds like a second migration.
So what that means,
second great migration.
Exactly. So what that means, right? Yeah. So what that means is within the first 2 decades of this century, 2000 to 2020, New York City lost nearly 200,000 black residents.
But that's crazy. That's crazy.
Exactly.
And I wonder what's the numbers right now, like between 2024 to 2025, because I mean, black unemployment rate just hit 7%, which is skyrocketing compared to other races. So you hyper fixating on black is especially what I want to talk about as well, because I'm like, that's what we're seeing right now in America.
Exactly. And think about it, right? This is not just like, you know, a data point. This is not just like people leaving. This is culture leaving these neighborhoods, right? Leaving Flatbush, leaving Bed-Stuy, leaving Harlem, leaving Crown Heights, leaving South Bronx, Southeast Queens, right? This is culture. This is history. This is wealth. This is people and everything that they brought to the neighborhood.
And like people, the reason as to why New York has so much like culture is because of that. But it's like, bro, people want to come to New York. People want to be New Yorkers. And a huge reason of that is that culture that you're talking about. And a lot of that culture, that New York culture, comes from black people as well. I mean, I even think like, you know, the only Renaissance in American history is the Harlem Renaissance. Don't let that go over your head. The only Renaissance in American history is the Harlem Renaissance. And it's not even widely spoken about as much anymore. And a lot of that history is kind of waning. Yeah,
and it's even crazier. You just asked, like, what are the numbers now, right? You know, we're in the middle of the 3rd decade of the century, right? So in 5 years, you know, when the census comes out again, people are going to have to fill out forms. I'm hoping when the data comes out in 2031 that another 50, 60, 70,000 black people have left the city again. This is a black exodus. And I think we need to be very intentional about, you know, our policy decisions, what we do to protect this population of people. So,
dang. So I guess speaking about the upcoming election, how do you feel about Jerrell? Because I mean, he's destined to win. It's been looking by the numbers.
That's my guy, point blank, period. It's not over. You know, make sure you get registered to vote. I think tomorrow is the last day to get registered to vote. And, you know, early voting starts, I think, October 25th. So, yeah, I think he's a guy to do it, point blank, period. That's my guy. I met him in May earlier this year.
Why though?
Why? I think, you know, earlier you asked me about what are some of the qualities that I care about. And I think, you know, he's someone who listens, right? Almost a year ago when he started his campaign, one of the first things that he did was interview immigrant working class people from different boroughs about why they ended up voting for Trump. And, you know, people spoke about, you know, the genocide in Palestine was one of them. And, you know, rising grocery costs, right? Like, that's why they ended up voting for Trump. And Trump really manipulated people like, oh, your eggs is expensive, XYZ. But people take heed to that. So I think he's someone who actually listened. And that's why his policy proposal is like, all right, grocery stores, right? People complain about groceries, so I'm going to bring in, you know, grocery stores, five in New York City, one in each borough. Talked about freezing the rent for people, right? Giving immediate relief to some of the most, you know, low-income people in the city, and amongst other things. So I think he listens. I think he has a level of discernment to listen to people, which is why he ran such a great campaign. I think he has the courage to go against the status quo, right? And the people with special interest that's been spending millions of dollars to thwart his campaign, and he continuously overcame that. And I think there's a level of integrity that, you know, we haven't seen in a while, right? We have Eric Adams, who, you know, was indicted. Andrew Cuomo, was, you know, accused, charged sexual harassment, sexual assault, amongst other scandals, right? I think Zoran brings a younger, fresh new face that people actually trust, and he went and he knocked on people's doors as well. And he didn't, he made sure to speak to people. So
yeah, and I feel like, do you think that that's like the new wave where it's like it's going to be like a social media takeover for a lot of, I guess like newer politicians? Like, is that the path?
I think that's definitely going to be part of it. I don't think that's the whole thing, right? I think, a lot of neighborhoods, and we definitely don't want to forget our elders too, who might not be too adept on social media, right? Yeah. But I definitely do think your social media,
voters.
Your social media branding definitely is important to connect to more people. The city is still growing. Gen Z is going to be, Gen Z's in the voter population. So I definitely think you got to do both. You got to knock on doors, talk to the people that may not be on social media, but you do need to be impressionable on social media. Definitely, I've seen it hurt other candidates. So it's going to be a combination.
Do you know a huge common talking point against Zoran, especially amongst like minority conservatives, is like most of Zoran's population that voted for him, or that voted for him in the primary, was not the minorities that kind of like represent on social media. How do you evaluate that?
So crazy enough, I actually was featured in an article in AP News a couple months back about this, and I think.
Wait, hold on. Shout that out, man.
Yeah.
Wait, you said in the article in the AP News?
Yeah, I got a little lead quote. Shout out my guy Jalen.
Hey, fire.
No, but I think part of that is true, right? But I also think his campaign did make an effort to go in the neighborhoods, right? The only candidate that knocked on my door in Flatbush was Zoran. His team came twice, right?
It came to my door a couple times
exactly.
too.
There's people who, he made sure there was canvases out in Canarsie, canvases out in East Flatbush, canvases out in Bed-Stuy, canvases out in Brownsville, right? So I think even though his demographic definitely was like the younger population of voters, not the traditional, black immigrant minority voters, I think he still made an effort to try to bridge those gaps, and there's definitely more work to be done. But I think your base is your base, right? I think your base is your base, and I don't think he intentionally neglected anyone either. So that's also important.
And maybe if he adopts the black agenda, man, maybe.
Come get with me, man. Come get with me, man. Get this win, and we could lock in, and we could do great things for the city. So
stop that black exodus. We don't want no more migration.
The data is telling us that, so that's the thing, right? I understand that elected officials need to be able to govern over everyone, and I do respect that. That is good policy, but the data is telling you that this population of people can no longer afford this city. It's telling us. And, I want to raise a family here, right? I want, my niece that I have 3 years old to be here, right? And if the data is trending in this direction and you don't do anything to stop it, I think you're actually being neglectful. So I think we do, I think, and especially the black organizations in New York City, let's come together, let's put together an agenda, and let's, with the next administration, let's try to stop this black exodus.
I like that a lot. What do you say to the people or the younger people that's like not involved into politics? They're like, I can't deal with this too much, and it's just fatigue.
Yeah, you gonna end up feeling it soon, right? You gonna end up feeling it sooner or later, right? We're currently in a government shutdown. Less people are gonna have access to SNAP and to healthy food. People are gonna start getting letters in the mail saying that their health insurance premiums are doubling, right? Taking 30-40% more out of your check, and now you can't afford health insurance. What happens if you get sick? What happens if a family member gets sick, right? If your parent has health insurance paying for the whole household, and now that premium doubles, right? What's that gonna mean, right? And I think, while I do understand that people are apathetic to politics, rightfully so, we got a second term of Trump, and a lot of our leaders are letting us down. But the fact of the matter is, policy decisions kill people.
Literally.
Right? People are dying because of a person's politics.
Literally.
And, if you don't get involved somewhere in the state, local, federal level, I think, more people are going to die. And, think about the future generations if you want kids, especially things that's happening with DEI and applying to college, right? Like, if one, you need to have the courage to fight these things now, but you also need to think about the long-term damage you're going to have. And if you're hands off, you're putting your life into someone else's hands. So.
Damn, that was powerful. And that was powerful because sometimes I just think about, I don't think a lot of families realize how one medical occurrence, they're away from poverty, like deep
man.
poverty. Like one medical occurrence, one $20,000 bill that could just be detrimental to you and your family, and take a lot of food out of your mouths just by one thing. And like to enforce that on so many Americans, you know, I feel like our administration is so hardball, but to enforce that on so many Americans is just, it's just inhumane, you know, and especially when we have so many systems around the world that can literally have shown us that we could adopt something like this, some type of healthcare, and it doesn't have to necessarily, you know, destroy their country or destroy their economy. But it's just nuts. It's really nuts. But I agree with that completely. Yeah, like, if you're not involved, man, like, especially in this day and age, like, where politics is life at this point, like, it's inextricable, because it I feel like nowadays it affects your day to day so much more than it was 10, 20 years ago. Then again, you know, I wasn't as active.
Yeah, but this second term of Trump, right? We had Trump run. This second term of Trump, they're out for blood. Yeah,
there's things that's getting repealed back that was, you know, put in law in the 60s. You know what I mean? Like, stuff like that's detrimental to communities, especially minority communities, that people need to be paying attention to. Yeah, I guess what's some advice or motivational advice that you could give towards Gen Z, especially to end them off on a lighter note?
Yeah, if you know me, you know I'm always saying this, but yo, stay passionate, right? I think, you know, Gen Z, our generation, we're very passionate,
yes sir,
creative individuals. You know, we're go-getters.
Gen Z, what's up, man?
For a fact. But I think in addition to that, you know, take the passion and make sure to nurture it with, you know, strategy, with intention. So don't let that flame go out. Stay passionate, but, you know, you really start building and you really start achieving, you really start accomplishing things when you take that passion. You're able to, you know, and transform it into something that's tangible, something that's, you know, intentional, and that could actually impact lives. And think of your passion in a collective manner, right? Think about everything that you're doing, thinking about how we're advancing your community, however you define that. So yeah, stay passionate. You know, I'm the most passionate, but, you know, I can lend you some.
all right. Listen. I know Jerrell from school, NYU. He did his master's there, and I was doing my undergrad. But that passion that he's talking about, that connects you amongst the people within Gen Z or the people within your generation. You know what I mean? Like, the reason why we've been able to build a relationship over time is just because as soon as I heard that, you know, he's into politics and he actually cares about his community and doing stuff, you know, like, that's something that I want to attach myself to and be able to uplift and platform, you know. But that passion, you know, he sees it with me too, with perspective and building. So he wants to come and help out. But that's how we build as a community. That's how we build as a generation, because we're here to progress ultimately. Yeah, man. I guess last question. Let's say, I'm not saying you're running, but let's say if you were to run, or if, let's say, like a Gen Z campaigner wants to run, what would be, actually no, personally what would be your non-negotiable promise to Flatbush or the greater community of Brooklyn?
Yeah, I haven't thought about this, but, you know, if I ever was to take that endeavor, I would say that I'd let my neighborhood know that I'll never run from them. You know, I'm someone who's, you know, born and raised in my neighborhood. I'm still living there. Have lost friends to the streets. Seen the neighborhood change for better or for worse. And I think many elected officials, they get a lesser level of power, and then they start to hide from their people, right? They start to hide from criticism, right? Nobody's above criticism, right? The people put you in office, right? So, you know, one thing that I could assure for, you know, if I'm ever in that position, that I'll never run from my neighborhood. I'll never run from criticism. You know, any decision that I make, I'm going to stand on it. And, you know, I'm also a human. If I do make a mistake and it was wrong, you know, I'll own up to it, and I'll learn from it, because that's the ability to grow. So for sure, I know one thing's for sure, two things for sure, and I'll never run from anybody, no matter what it is. So
heard you, man. Y'all here first, man. Jerrell Gray, you know a platform you gonna see him on Perspective, of course. And we're going to
platform.
It's a passionate platform. You already know, man. You already know. So listen. Links are in the description. His links are in the description as well. If you want to go figure out what he's doing, his Instagram, I don't know, websites, whatever he wants to put down, we'll link it down. But man, you know, Gen Z, what's up? I love y'all. Be perceptive to build perspective. And I will see y'all next week. Very simple. Love y'all. Gen Z, what is up, man?
Yes, sir. Gen Z, stay passionate. Facts.
Simple.